Hey there guys, how's it going? Tyler here with your Movie Fix, and today we're going to be doing something a little different than normal. This is actually the first in a new series that I'm going to be doing called A Closer Look. Really, this is just a time where we can talk about an actor, director, writer, a trilogy, series of movies, or a movie more specifically in more of an overview kind of way instead of it just being a straight up review or anything like that. This is really a time where I encourage a lot of discussion. This is what I hoping it sparks. And that's really just the whole purpose of what I'm doing here. And today we're going to be talking about the Dark Knight Trilogy. Before I get into that, also, I will be giving away the Dark Knight Trilogy on Blu-ray. I have them all right here, new and ready to go. And but more details on that towards the end, and I'll talk about that on how to get them. So really, just before we get into more of the specific movies themselves, the trilogy as a whole, I think, is absolutely fantastic. One of the best out there, full of a lot of good things, full of a couple of bad things, but I think the bad things can be narrowed down to them specifically. But as far as there's plenty of good that goes on as a whole in the trilogy, the big thing being the cast and the supporting cast, whether it's Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, Heath Ledger, Aaron Eckhart, so many people, Liam Neeson, the list goes on and on. Christopher Nolan and his casting team, they knocked it out of the park, and they made sure that these movies had some weight to them. They had some talent behind them, and that's something that's strong throughout all three movies for the most part. Also, very, very strong cinematography by Wally Pfister, which only got better. He's pretty much Christopher Nolan's go-to man. He pretty much stepped his game up each movie. The sound mixing, sound design, all of those. The production design, a big thing with creating Gotham and making it its own character. They did a phenomenal job with that. And really what it comes down to with these movies is what Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan, and David Goyer were able to do was create just really, really good stories with fantastic main characters and villains alone. I don't want to say necessarily that DC has the best villains, while I do love many of them, and I think they use great villains. But it really all comes to a good story and good writing, and I think the Nolan brothers did that very well. Like I said, these aren't perfect movies, and it's not a absolutely perfect trilogy, but it is damn near it, and is one of the best out there for sure. So let's get into it and really talk about some of these movies specifically. Starting with Batman Begins. First off, really, I have it on Steelbook. I just wanted to show that off for a second, just real quick. And I actually added in some inside art to it, because this one came blank, and I added that in myself with some HP photo paper and a template, stuff like that. Nothing really going on there other than I wanted to show that off real quick. I do own all the Steelbooks, but this movie right here, Batman Begins, that came out when I was in 5th grade. And, back then I didn't really appreciate movies too much. But even then, I could tell that there was, as a 5th grader, I could tell that there was a ginormous step up in quality from the Tim Burton movies. I'll say that. As much as I love them, I do think these are better. And obvious ginormous step up in quality from the Schumacher movies, which killed Batman, killed superheroes for a little while. And I think that this movie was really responsible for bringing them back into the forefront. Yes, we had Spider-Man and X-Men that were doing pretty good things for comic book movies in general. But I think this was the first step in taking it a little more seriously, even though I love the X-Men movies, and I think they've evolved over time as well. And the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, which I adore. This is a totally different monster, and it changed the way that origin stories were told later on with Marvel movies and some of the DC ones that we're getting now with Man of Steel, and we'll see what happens going forward. But I also think this movie kind of had to fight the stench of the previous Batman movies because it wasn't a very big hit. Made, close to 400 million worldwide, which is no small number, but it was not a billion like the following two installments of this series. But this movie did so much for the character of Batman, and finally getting a really good origin with introducing his ninja training and going off and what he's doing in Asia. With Ra's al Ghul, introducing him was a fantastic addition. And back with the supporting cast, adding in characters like Lucius Fox, Ra's al Ghul, and Scarecrow, who are very big players in Batman's mythology. To put them in the forefront in a movie like this for a new series, they could have gone the easy route and just, here's the new Joker right here, first movie. But I like that they went a little more obscure. And Ra's al Ghul is very, very important to the Batman mythos, and getting Liam Neeson to play him was just genius. I love him. He is probably the most likable villain. I mean, he's basically pure evil. I mean, he wants to destroy an entire city, and he's responsible for all these terrible things with the League of Shadows. Or League of Assassins, whatever you want to call them. But he's such an inspirational villain. I love him. Everything that this guy says is so quotable and so inspirational. I watched this movie, especially that the first quarter of the movie that deals with his training. I'm like, fuck, I just want to go off into the mountains and train to become a ninja. It makes me want to hit the gym, do all kinds of crazy shit, and become Batman. And that's what's so dangerous, I think, about these movies is in a good way, it really made Batman believable in our real world. And that's what this trilogy was what would Batman be like right now here in this world, 2005? What would it be like? And how could he practically come about and do anything? And that was so cool about these movies to me. And something that was very important with this movie that they kind of lacked, and pretty much all of the other ones, is that they needed to make Bruce Wayne a cool character. They needed to make him very interesting, and not just, you're waiting for Batman to show up, which you kind of were, but Bruce Wayne enough was entertaining. He was an actual character. He wasn't just there as a throwaway, and you're waiting for Batman to show up. So that's what I really liked. That was a very important thing. And while I don't think Batman Begins is the best movie of the trilogy, it's still a very strong movie. I still think Rises and Dark Knight beat it out just a hair. They're all slightly better than the other, but I think this is the most Batman movie. I think it's the most Batman accurate. It looks the most accurate. I like that they made him, this creature of the night. And Christian Bale did a great job with his mannerisms. I really did like the costume in this one. They went a little more militaristic in The Dark Knight and forward, but I really did like this one. I actually really liked the cowl. It looked a little bird-like at the beginning of The Dark Knight, and I'm not sure what was going on with that, but I think it worked very well in this movie, and I really like the logo on it. It's a shame that they kind of had to change it up, but I did really like it in this movie. And while it's not as accurate as something like what we're about to get in Dawn of Justice, but I still think it's probably my favorite Bat costume aside from Ben Affleck's right now. And back to what this movie being the most Batman-like, I think they nailed the hell out of Gotham, and they made Gotham its own character in this movie. It was very dark. It was very dirty. I mean, it was ugly. Like when you're in the Narrows and over at Arkham, that is what Gotham should look like. I liked how it was rainy. It was really grimy. There was a lot of smog going around. It was just an ugly, dirty city. And something that this movie had that the others didn't is the color grading in this one was a little warmer. There were browns, there were oranges, yellows, greens, and it just looked like you were in this filthy fucking city. And that's why I like this one. I think it edges out the other ones in that regard by making this a more Batman accurate. Gotham is more accurate. I really wish they would have stuck with that aesthetic of Gotham instead of going with this, very clean, sterile looking city like we got in the other ones. And I think part of that was because of the failure of Superman Returns, because correct me if I'm wrong, they were planning to, have a movie with Brandon Routh and Christian Bale. There's a 3-year gap between Batman Returns, but the year after this is actually when, Batman Begins, is when Superman Returns came out, and that wasn't received as well. It didn't make as much money because of what was going on with the budget. They had to carry over everything from the previous failed Superman movies and put that on the budget, so it didn't make any money, relatively, and it wasn't received very well for the audiences. So I think they kind of just majorly changed their plans going forward with this movie and into The Dark Knight. But yeah. Also, what this movie did so well was introducing Jim Gordon and the relationship with Batman and Gordon and the GCPD. Very antagonistic, and that's what I love. And it's kind of in the books with how, the GCPD is kind of hunting after Batman. They don't get along. He's a vigilante. He's taking justice into his own hands. All that good stuff. But Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon is just absolutely perfect. He's 100% a chameleon in these movies. He plays him so well, and it is a little hard to imagine somebody else playing him now. I know they can't get him back. I didn't want them to get him back as much as I love him. And now we got J.K. Simmons playing Commissioner Gordon, and that's going to be phenomenal, very interesting. Can't wait to see that. But Gary Oldman played him so well, and I love that they made him an integral part of the story. Like I said, back with the strong supporting cast, these movies aren't very Batman-centric, like with Batman getting a ton of on-screen time. What makes these movies so well is that they have these strong supporting characters that kind of carry the movie all throughout in between the little bits of Batman, because we don't get that much Batman, and Gordon and Alfred are a really big part of that. And I also like that we kind of got away from, the stereotypical Batman love interest, and I like that we went with Rachel Dawes. Katie Holmes, I do think she played her pretty well. I think they had a lot of great moments, especially with the whole thing with him hinting at that he is Batman and then jumping off the rooftop and the music kicks in. Chills every time. I really like them together. And the ending for this movie with the Joker card, all of these movies have very, very strong endings, and that was probably, I still think it's probably the weakest ending, but it's still enough to give you chills, and it's set up enough going into the next movie, and it was a shame that we had to wait 3 years for the next one, but it was well worth it. So moving on, with that being said, we're going to be talking about The Dark Knight. Also, I'm going to just show off this steelbook right here. This thing is gorgeous. You know, the thing about The Dark Knight, for me, now this movie came out when I was in 8th grade. I didn't really care when I saw it. I knew that it was part of Batman Begins, but it was like, I didn't really appreciate movies at the time. And there was so much going on in the news with Heath Ledger. And I just thought the movie was overhyped, overrated. And I didn't want to like it. And for whatever reason, the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh, that's cool. That's a Batman movie. Like, I really didn't think anything of it. And there was like a period of like 3 years where I never saw it again. And then when I actually sat down, actually it was 4 years. It was before Dark Knight Rises. I was like, oh, I'm going to watch the other ones to refresh my memory. And it just fucking blew my mind. I don't know what I was thinking at the time when I didn't like it, and I never really appreciated it. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I was a lot more into film. I had a bigger appreciation for it. So watching that movie, the performances killed me. I mean, they were so good. I love this movie now. I just don't know what the hell I was thinking at the time, because I did not want to like this movie. For whatever reason, I just thought, oh, it's so overhyped, overrated, and I don't think it is. I don't think it's an overrated movie. I really just think it is genuinely that fucking good. Now, it's one of the best comic book movies ever made, and it's also one of the best crime thrillers ever made, and just movies in general. It's just that good. But as far as the transition from Batman Begins to this movie stepped it up big time. From the story in general, the cinematography was a hell of a lot better, with a lot more IMAX footage, and I think that added a lot to it. The special effects and the performances, Christian Bale felt a lot more comfortable as Bruce Wayne in this. It kind of showed a lot. If you go from Batman Begins to The Dark Knight, he just seemed a lot more confident playing this character, and I really like that. And a big difference, and definitely the budget was a big difference, but something about Batman Begins versus The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, something about Batman Begins just looks a little cheaper. But I think a lot of that came with the budget, and now they were able to step up their game and go with a little more practical effects. And it helped the movie out so much more. We also got a new bat suit in this one. Now, there are so many people that don't even like these movies, like diehard Batman fans that can't stand them. One of my best friends here, he's a diehard Batman fan, but he can't stand this trilogy because of how unlike Batman in the comics it is. But I love the unique take that Christopher Nolan was able to do with these movies, and I think it's a very special, unique thing, and I'll always appreciate them. But one of the things is the costume. Now, like I said, I really enjoy the Batman Begins costume, and as much as something tells me inside, my inner Batman fan tells me I should not like the costume in The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, but I do. It isn't very Batman, but it fits very well with what Christopher Nolan was doing. The whole militaristic, it's practical, blah blah blah. I think it looks good in these movies. I think the Batman Begins suit would be perfect if they just put the cowl on from The Dark Knight on that suit. Would have been great, but yeah, I do like it. It's very different from what we've seen in other Batman movies, but it works for this specific trilogy. I would not want to see this suit in Batman v Superman. And also, can I just LOL really hard at Katie Holmes passing to play as Rachel Dawes? I don't know what it was. Maybe she thought oh, it's just a Batman movie, silly comic book thing. And whatever happened in between Batman Begins and Dark Knight, for whatever reason, she didn't want to join the cast of this movie. What the fuck was she thinking? Because this ended up being one of the biggest movies of all time. One of the most memorable. This is going to go down forever as one of the greatest Batman movies. What a shame on her, but I really liked Maggie Gyllenhaal. I think she was able to... It's hard to say whether or not she picked up slack because Rachel had a bigger role in this movie. So I can't really compare too much between Katie Holmes and Maggie Gyllenhaal. I like them both for what they did, but I really liked Maggie Gyllenhaal in this movie. And one of the things I love so much about The Dark Knight is how much inspiration it took from The Long Halloween. Very different aesthetically, but the story-wise is pretty much like it. And they kind of almost split The Long Halloween between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight with what's going on with the Falcones and the Maronis. Obviously no Calendar Man or anything like that, but the Joker's involvement in The Dark Knight is obviously way heavier than it was in The Long Halloween. He wasn't a big player in that. But the big thing is the origin of Harvey Dent and Two-Face and how Joker is responsible for that. It's a little different from the book. But there's some imagery in here that is so good. With Gordon, Harvey Dent, and Batman on the rooftop, that was straight out of The Long Halloween. That's something I love. And Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon now in this movie, and Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent. They both worked so well, and I don't know what happened with Aaron Eckhart because he's such a great actor. Maybe he's not a leading man, but he was great as a supporting role in this movie. And I really like the origin of that and how Joker was responsible. Granted, yeah, it was different from Long Halloween. It doesn't matter. It was still a great movie, and he was a great character. And he really gave off a really good performance. But it's like, I guess, we have the benefit of being the observer of everything going on. But I could never really understand why Rachel chose to be with Harvey over Bruce. Didn't make a lot of sense. He kind of seemed like an asshole. And she didn't seem like she really cared all that much with him telling her that he loved her on the phone, and she just kind of hangs up. I was like, oh, maybe she's not as into him as he is into her, so it was just kind of weird, but she still chose him over Bruce, so that was a little what with me, but it worked. Now, obviously, you can't talk about this movie without talking about Heath Ledger as the Joker, and again, I didn't want to like him, but he just brought so much to the character, and I love his performance more and more each time I see it. He steals this movie. He steals every scene he's in. I don't know how much of that has to do with how much power does the character the Joker have, and how much power did Jack Nicholson and Heath Ledger have over that character and what they were able to bring to the movie, because I don't know if it's just the nature of the Joker to steal everything that he's in, and how much of it is the actor, which, not to take away any credit, because they both did a phenomenal job, and Heath Ledger was awesome, and at the time, I wasn't big on, any chat boards or anything like that, so I wasn't one of those people hating on the fact that it was Heath Ledger as the Joker or anything like that. And what kills me with anything to do with the Dark Knight Joker is I'm not really big on the whole line with why so serious. It actually really pisses me off every time that somebody quotes him saying that. I don't get it. I didn't think that why so serious conversation with Michael Jai White was that iconic. I don't think it was that iconic. It really wasn't a big deal to me. I don't think the line was that quotable. I don't think it was that great. I mean, it was an awesome performance in that, but I think everything else, every other scene he was in was more iconic to me than that little exchange that he had with the mob boss. Like, specifically when he has Rachel at Bruce's fundraiser, and he's got a knife up to her, and he's talking with the camera panning and spinning around them. That was awesome. That was beautiful. That was so well done. And the interrogation scene with Batman, which alone is very iconic, but why so serious line gets quoted so much, I'll never fucking understand it, because I don't really don't care for it. But it's also really cool that this movie revolves so much around the Joker's games and his schemes, and that's something that's also really big in the books. But I mean, it was just one thing after another, more cards falling, more dominoes going in this movie, with what's going on with the hospital and him telling everybody that they need to kill this guy or he's gonna blow up a hospital. What's going on with the boats, kidnapping people and hanging them. He just had a constant presence going on and on and on. And, that awesome IMAX opening with the bank robbery. So much that was going on with the Joker. And again, this harkens back to these movies work so well because they're not hitting you over the head with it's Batman, Batman, Batman. Because we have such a great supporting cast. And Heath Ledger, again, he steals this movie. Now, on the whole no killing rule for Batman, it doesn't bug me that he does. He basically killed Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins by not saving him, whatever. But he full on tackles Harvey Dent off of a ledge, and he falls and dies. And I don't remember that really upsetting that many people, because it's such a great movie. It doesn't really matter what you think Batman's rule is. And again, that's something that it works sometimes in the books with Batman's no killing rule. But I think killing somebody is not always black and white. Whether it's in fiction or in our real world, it's not always black and white with what's right or wrong. And I think killing Harvey in this case, or what he thought he needed to do to stop him, was the right thing to do. I don't remember people ever really freaking out that he killed Harvey Dent in this movie, but they freak out over everything else to do with Batman killing somebody. So that's whatever. But the ending of this movie, with what's going on, the dialogue, the exchange between Batman and Gordon, that gives me chills every time, with the score picking up. And that's another thing, the score by Hans Zimmer really picked up in this movie. But that whole exchange with him telling him he's a silent guardian, the watchful protector in the Dark Knight, perfect ending, gives me chills every time. I am more satisfied with it every time I watch it. The greatest way to end a movie, so epic. I just love it so much. So now let's move on to the end of this with the Dark Knight Rises. Now, I do have a big poster there. I will say, probably not the best. I am torn between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises being the best of this trilogy. All three of them, it really depends on which one I saw last. With what I think is the best of them. It's so hard for me to decide because I love watching all of these movies right after one another, which is what I did yesterday. I watched all three movies back to back so I could make this video. And I loved in the trailers. This was by now, this is 2012. I was really into movies. And this was the first Dark Knight movie that I actually saw in theaters, and it wasn't in IMAX or anything like that, but still getting to see those IMAX shots on the big screen was just so great. Seeing them step up their game like that. I liked in the trailer so much how they were selling this and marketing it as the epic conclusion, because as flawed as this movie is, I still love it. I've seen this movie more than any others in the Dark Knight trilogy. I've seen it probably close to 20 times, if not more. I know it's flawed, but I still think it was a really, really good conclusion to this trilogy, and I think it worked very well. And although we didn't get the most comic accurate Bane, which is fine, again, this is Christopher Nolan's take on the characters. If you didn't really understand that by his third movie in, you were bound to be disappointed with what you got. Again, right here, I got this wonderful steelbook for The Dark Knight Rises. I really love that the way they introduced Bane. He's like this paramilitary, real-world terrorist, basically. And I really liked how the story came full circle from Batman Begins to here, with tying in everything with the League of Shadows and Ra's al Ghul being responsible for everything that's going on. How much of that had to do with Heath Ledger dying and they couldn't tell a specific story for the third one, I don't know. I think the plan was they were still going to end the series with this movie, but whether or not Bane was the original intention, I don't know. I also think this one has the best soundtrack out of all three of the movies. He worked with, I think his name is James Newton Howard, was a lot more. He had a bigger hand in Batman Begins and Dark Knight, but you can tell a big difference from Begins to Dark Knight, and this one, slowly Hans Zimmer has a bigger and bigger influence to the point where he's the only one working on Dark Knight Rises, and I love the soundtracks for all three of these movies. I love Hans Zimmer's work. The primal yelling and how primitive the music is with the drums and stuff like that works so well, gets me every time. That, what you hear, the audio of a movie, that's 50% of the movie, and he immerses you so well in this, and it's just I think it's one of the best soundtracks ever. Now again, this is an obviously flawed movie, but it's still great nonetheless. And I'll talk about a couple of those and common criticisms with the movie and things like that, like the exchange between Blake and Bruce and how he knew that he was Batman by the look on his face. That doesn't really bug me. I know that gets a lot of people, like they say that's a plot hole and this and that, or it just didn't work for them. You know why it works? Because it's a movie. That's theatrical. It's dramatic. That's how it is. And again, nothing's black and white. You don't know these people in the fictional world or anything like that. So that worked for me. Whether or not that worked for everybody else, the whole thing with him knowing that there was something else to Bruce Wayne by faking this look on his face like he was okay. It's dramatic and it's theatrical, and that's why it worked for me in this movie. And another thing that really never made a lot of sense was how Alfred knows anything about Bane. He's like, oh, you heard these rumors, Bruce, about I know this and that about Bane. And I think it's so hard to explain that because he just out of nowhere knows these things about Bane. But at the same time, Alfred's past throughout all three of these movies is very vague, very mysterious. You don't know much. And in The Dark Knight, he talks about traveling. Some men just want to watch the whole world burn kind of thing. So we know as Batman fans that Alfred does have a very interesting past with special ops or anything like that. Being a medic, an actor, Alfred has done everything. But it's not really explained in these movies, so the whole thing with him just knowing about Bane and having information to tell Bruce was kind of out of place. It didn't really work for me. Now, these movies do tend to have a very well cast villains, but Marion Cotillard as Talia al Ghul, it worked for me up until the point where you actually know she's Talia, and for whatever reason, she just changed her performance totally, and I didn't really buy into it, that she was just this suddenly evil person, and it kind of fell a little flat. But I did really like Bane. I loved Tom Hardy playing him. It wasn't traditional. He wasn't, Hispanic. In fact, it's almost implied, that he's Middle Eastern. He's so racially ambiguous, but where the prison was, it felt more Middle Eastern to me than Hispanic. So that's kind of whatever. Introducing more and more characters. We get Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I really liked her. I felt like I was drawn into her every scene that she was in. I thought she worked very well. And she's just very different Catwoman from Michelle Pfeiffer. and there you can argue all day about who did better with Catwoman. I think they both did really good, but what Anne Hathaway was able to do, she kind of reeled in the whole sexy thing. It wasn't over the top, and she seemed like a more fun Catwoman. They're both accurate to Catwoman in the books in their own ways, and I think if you would have put Anne Hathaway in the Tim Burton suit or something like that with the actual cowl and ears, would have been absolutely perfect. But I did really enjoy her performance and her interactions with Bruce and Batman, like a very specific scene where he's telling her the plan, and he's giving her the Bat Pod, where they're walking in the snow. That seems like an homage to Batman Returns, but that was shot beautifully. Again, this movie had phenomenal cinematography. Thank you, Wally Pfister, for stepping your game up. But I really liked Catwoman, and I think she worked pretty well with this movie, and I really enjoyed Anne Hathaway and what she was able to do. And pretty much every Bane and Batman showdown was fucking awesome as hell. I really do enjoy the fights, and again, what Christopher Nolan does with his choreography, yes, these aren't the best looking fights, but it's a practical martial arts, whatever, for this version of Batman in these specific movies, so that works fine. But Christopher Nolan uses his action to drive the drama, to drive the story, so it works well. I'm not going to sit here and complain about how he's throwing punches or not doing kicks and flips and whatever. We're going to get that, but I appreciate and enjoy what we were able to get for this universe of movies. And again, with the whole plot holes and what's going on with after he gets his back broken and what's going on with the bomb, people tend to forget that this movie takes place like over 5 months, and the bomb has 4 months before it goes off, and people are like, oh, how did he escape from the prison and suddenly he's there? He wasn't suddenly there. It took him 22 days because there was an exchange in the movie where it said the bomb goes off in 23 days, and when Batman shows up, the bomb has 12 hours. So how did Bruce Wayne get across the world overnight? He didn't. Did you watch Batman Begins? Because he knows his way around the world with no money whatsoever. So a lot of people's problems with this movies, I think, would have been solved if they just fucking paid attention and listened to what was going on, because there's not nearly as many plot holes as people think there are in this movie. Again, there are flaws, whatever. And one of the things I really didn't like is the bomb cliche with seconds to go before it blows, but especially with them kissing and talking and everything while the bomb's got like a minute left. Probably shouldn't have done that. It would have been fine if they were like, oh, it's got 3 minutes. Okay, we can talk for just a second, but I really got to get going. But the whole, it's like with Winter Soldier and the bomb's got 2 seconds, 1 second, and then it goes. That's whatever. It worked for the ending, and I think it was a very satisfying ending. One thing that I think was a problem was including the Robin Easter egg, that John Blake is actually Robin. Ooh, that caused so much confusion among the general audience with, oh, that's Robin, look at him. Again, his name isn't Robin. The character Robin's name isn't Robin. Whatever. I get it. It was an Easter egg. It was a tip of the hat to the fans. Look, haha, it's Robin, and he's going into the Batcave. That's whatever. I just think it was unnecessary. Probably shouldn't have been there. So that's whatever. But I really enjoy the ending, what's going on with Alfred, how things come full circle with him. The first time I saw that, before you find out that Bruce is still alive, man, Michael Caine as Alfred, he gets me emotional. Even if I kind of forget, if I just get so into the movie at Bruce's funeral, basically, that gets me emotional. And the way Hans Zimmer's score is picking up when you start seeing that they're at the cafe, when Robin goes into the cave, and just the movie concludes very well. I think it was a very satisfying ending to a phenomenal trilogy. And again, this is what Christopher Nolan did is so unique, and I don't think anything like this could ever be recreated. I think it's a fantastic trilogy. I love each of these movies for many different reasons. Again, not all of them are perfect, but as a whole, I think this trilogy is damn near close to it. So really, I just want to know, what do you guys think of all of these movies? What are some of the things that you really love? Now, back to the contest for the Blu-ray movies. What I want to know, this is how you're going to get them. And like I said, I still encourage discussion for what's going on with the movies anyway, but if you are interested in getting these movies specifically, before you type your comment, I want you to put hashtag Blu-ray. And how I'm going to choose is, I want to know, what is your favorite aspect, your favorite scene, and out of any of these movies, I want you to sell me on why this is the best absolute thing, why Christian Bale was the best, why this specific scene was the best, why Commissioner Gordon was the best character. I want to know just what did you like and what did you really dislike about these movies. And anybody can, I really want to know, all of my subscribers, what do you guys think of the trilogy, but also to the people who want the movies, be sure to contribute to the conversation, because I just really want to know. So anyways, guys, this has been your movie fix. Be sure to subscribe for more movie news, movie reviews, trailer breakdowns, and little things like this in the movie world. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next video.